major milestone for the country, the financial sector, and indeed CBK. It's actually a milestone by extension for every one of us, every Kenyan, and we should be proud of this moment. So later on in the presentation, I will ask that the banknotes be brought to you. They are already in circulation. They are already in circulation. I repeat that. They are already in circulation. And I would want you to see some of them and for you to actually see them as they are. You can feel them and so forth. The points to make are as follows. First, this involved a long process. I would actually add the word arduous in this long and arduous process, and we have followed all the applicable laws to get to this point. And in terms of the quality of the notes, we have tried also listening to the public. We've tried to put together a set of notes that we'll be proud of. We've also listened to the population. As you know, we actually did we involved the public in the designs of the notes and the various features on it. The coins, if you recall, had the pictures of or had images depicting our wildlife. And in the case of these banknotes, they are depicting various elements of our activity, economic activity, and aspects of things that relate to our prosperity, economic prosperity. So we have green energy, we have agriculture, we have tourism, we have I've forgotten the other one, and also we have governance. These are actually, the other one was sports. I'm sorry. How could I forget that? How could I forget that? So that's what has been depicted on it, on the back side of the notes. On the front side of the notes, one of the images that is there is really of the Kenyatta International Conference Center. It actually is something that all of us find recognizable. And in my words, when we launched this is iconic, the building, and I think everyone in the entire country recognizes that structure. I think we all know how those of us that come to Nairobi the first time, the first thing they want to see is Kenyatta International Conference Center and take their pictures there, because it is part of our sort of landmarks in our country. There are other images. For instance, there's an image of a dove at the front, which again symbolizes peace. There are images of animals coming through the numbers, and the big five, as I explained during the launch. So in sum, the design of the notes has satisfied every applicable law. It has satisfied public participation. We got a lot of ideas. For instance, as I have said before, one of the ideas from the public was to make the notes more accessible to visually impaired persons. And consistent with that, if you look at the notes, you'll see there are certain elements that make it much more accessible. There are certain bars that allow that sort of feeling of what the note is. There's also the numbers are raised, also at least to give it distinction, and also the writing of the name Kenya and so forth. Now those are not the only features, but I wanted to assure you, members of the public, members of the press, that this was an effort that was thorough, followed the law, and indeed successful at the end. So right here, I would want to thank everyone who was involved in this. First and foremost, the population, by giving us their ideas and also giving us time to deal with the issues that came up. I also want to thank the other supporting, let's say, those that supported us going forward, other parts of the governance structure. And finally, of course, I want to thank our own central bank staff that have worked tirelessly. I would even say many long nights here in the central bank, or long days, and have done the entire process with remarkable precision and accuracy, and indeed with utmost discretion. So that's what I want to say about that, and you'll see the notes as we complete the presentation. In terms of the way forward, we will continue to release the new banknotes to all the banks, all banks and microfinance institutions. Of course, at this moment, if you go to a bank, what you'll find is they'll probably have stocks that were there last Friday, meaning not the new banknotes, but very soon they'll be in every single banking hall, or rather bank branch, every single microfinance branch. And I think the point is this is expected to work as well, sort of seamlessly. Would also say that an element that is now in high gear is the element of public awareness. That has really kicked into high gear, and explaining to the public the various elements. You've seen, for instance, we've been making a campaign in the media, both print, TV, and very soon radio as well. So it is important that this information gets to the deepest corners of our republic, to every single person that is within our borders. There's also some other work that needs to be done, but those are technical issues. Banks need to recalibrate their counting machines and all those other things, but that is, that is work. That's par for the course. There's no concern about those considerations. So I think in a nutshell, it is important to appreciate that milestone, and also appreciate that this is something that we should be very proud of as a nation, very proud of as a citizen of this country, and obviously very proud of if you have been associated with this particular project. That said, and you would probably agree with me, that yes, a lot of people have been very pleased with this. The population, in terms of the people you interviewed and others in the newspapers yesterday and elsewhere, and indeed even today on the various media outlets and so forth, there's been a lot of support and joy and gratitude for achieving this milestone. Those, I think, are important to appreciate. Those are the sentiments of the people that have been expressed. That said, yes, there are other elements that don't see it that way, and obviously believe that things may have not been done in that way, that process. And there are some that have made the claim that they do want to get their own assurances that the process was done correctly, and that's fine. I think it's fine for people to make those questions, but I think the point here is that we need to move ahead with the things even as we answer those questions. In particular, one of the reasons I was late just now is that we've just a legal challenge has just been filed in one of the courts, and we have to deal with that. We are not waiting for it. We think this is more than just an inconvenience. It is something that we wouldn't call for, but so be it. We are obviously willing to deal with those issues in a matter of urgency. There's nothing worse than having uncertainty with regard to the currency. Nothing worse. Because every one of us uses that currency day in, day out. So it is important for every single Kenyan to have that assurance, and this is why we would want those matters to be dealt with due urgency, with due haste. Now I want to go to the next part, which is the Gazette notice that was also the second Gazette notice that was issued on May 31, withdrawing the currency. That is, withdrawing the shillings 1,000 banknotes that were prior to the new generation banknotes. I called it in my speech the 1,000 shillings old series banknotes. So this is really distinguishing them again with the new generation ones. The new generation ones remain, and you'll get a chance to look at them in a minute. But the anything issued that's just the 1,000, not the others, just the 1,000 Kenya shilling banknotes, those have been withdrawn. And the Gazette notice indicates that they will cease to be legal tender on October 1, 2019. So that is the clarity of the Gazette notice. It is true that there are those that claim that we had no right to withdraw the currency, and I think we will have that moment in court. The point is that we have always had that right, and we have used it in the past. So this isn't the first time we are using it. So I think we will make our claims, we'll make our argument in court, because this is just part of our normal operation, part of our currency management, of which we have complete independence. So that is something that is enshrined in the Constitution, but I think the arguments will be heard in court. So we've made this withdrawal of currency. What was behind it? I think in the speech I mentioned that there were two reasons, principal reasons. The first is to deal with the illicit financial flows that we have seen. The second is to deal with counterfeits that have begun to emerge. The illicit financial flows, one of you asked me recently, we have the numbers. Now I would add that, I would say that it would be a bit heroic for those that are engaged in illegal activity to tell the central bank what the activity is. You understand, right? What is the volume? It doesn't quite work that way. But sure, there are estimates, but and we in the central bank don't have estimates of that. We don't do that. But I think there are a lot of people there that deal with. There's actually even an institution that deals with the illicit financial flows, and they have their estimates. But I would rather look at something else. You have seen some of the cases that have been coming through in terms of illicit flows, illicit transactions. You've also seen, things related to, let's say, I would say odd transactions. You can call them fake gold or whatever else it is. And there is always a second leg of that transaction, which is the flow of the cash, of the finances. So you do have a good estimate of some of it. And at the end of the day, you don't need to have an overall picture. You don't have to be very precise. All you know is iko shida. And the iko shida is enough for you to act. If the iko shida is not enough, then we have a problem. I guess the point is you don't wait until the house is really burning before you use the fire extinguisher. When you begin to smell smoke, grab that fire extinguisher and begin to deal with it. Okay? So that's really what I want to say about the illicit financial flows. The point also is they are not just in Kenya. they are also in our neighboring countries. In effect, Kenyan currency, the Kenyan shilling, is the regional US dollar. Meaning the way, say, around the world, you have people that, you can use the US dollar, at least for the most part, and you can use it even for paying taxes and other transactions like that. Well, the Kenya shilling actually has similar, let's say, the acceptance, not just in the East African community area, but also wider, beyond those East African community boundaries. And so it is therefore important to make sure that our currency is not tainted by those illicit financial flows. Now, why the illicit financial flows are becoming more problematic now, I don't know. That's for others to write the history, or for that matter, papers and all those other things. The point here is that yes, this is something that is emerging, and iko shida. Therefore, we need to deal with it quickly and conclusively. There's another trend, which is counterfeits. This had not been there, and again, I would say that the Kenyan currency has many security features that have yet been dealt with, if you understand what I'm saying here. So actually, the counterfeits that we have seen recently, and you have reported it quite widely in your outlets, has been kind of very poor. But that's not the point. The point, you can see the intention of these people. Clearly, they can see there's something there. So I think the point here is we have to deal with them conclusively. And this is the reason, the second reason for this measure of withdrawing the older series 1,000 shilling banknotes. Now, having said that, some of you are concerned that, and they have heard a lot about what happened in India, and wonder, will we have a similar problem? The point is, we need to learn from the experiences of others, and I would want to submit that we actually looked at the matter in India, why things went the way they went. Meaning, what are the learning points? What are maybe the mistakes that they made from a perspective of the outcomes? It's true there are significant effects, long lines, long lines. The economy actually shrunk, or rather, the growth rate came down precipitously. But I think the point here is that we had, if you may, there are some points we learned from them, and I want to repeat from this. By the way, it's not unusual to have demonetization. Maybe India is the most famous example, but there are other examples, and I would actually mention two. Well, actually, I'll mention three. There is the example of Zimbabwe some time ago, where they demonetized their own currency and actually ended up going to the rand, US dollar, euro, and that's the currencies that they were using at the time. But they demonetized, they withdrew their own currency. This obviously was trying to deal with more fundamental issues. I won't go into the history of it. You know the history as much as I do. There was also the demonetization of the other, let's say, other European currencies at the time of the euro, when the euro was introduced. And obviously we can talk about the D-mark as an exception in many ways. But I think the point is they demonetized the lira, the Spanish peseta, and all those other things. I think, again, we know why that was the case. I just, again, want to insist that demonetization is not something that is, it's a tool of central banking. It's a tool like any other that has to be used correctly. There's also the example of actually Kenya. We demonetized at the end of 2011. For instance, you know, the 5 shilling note is not valid today. i.e. we demonetized it, we withdrew it. So there are many examples, but I think I want to leave those with you. What are the lessons that we learned from the Indian experience? First is that they decided to demonetize immediately, meaning the announcement was made and immediately the currency could not be used for transactions, meaning it ceased to be legal tender upon announcement. Now, you can imagine what happened. Let's say you're a truck driver. You're moving from point A to point B and you stop for lunch at a particular place, and then it gets demonetized, and that's all you have. I mean, you have problems about your lunch, you have problems about where you're going to buy your fuel because you don't have money to continue. So you can imagine what happened there. And the next instant was, I need to change this because they gave you 50 days to transact that, to change your now non-legal tender to a new bill which would have been legal tender. Tried to go to a bank, but they didn't have the currency. So there was a shortage, you understand, because it takes time to do some of these things. So you can already see what was the decision would lead to some serious crisis. And that's really what happened. So, and this is why we have allowed a period where the transactions will continue. You can continue to transact, but at a particular time, October 1, it will cease to be legal tender. Now there is a question that has come up, but Governor, why did you give them 4 months? You're being too generous. Why not do it in a month or in a week? And I think that question is valid. The answer is simple. There is a balance that we have to strike. And this relates, for instance, to our people, Wanjiku. Think of your shosho, right? And maybe when you visited her, you felt really generous and you gave her 5 crisp $1,000, 1,000 shilling banknotes. And she's been keeping them and all those other things. You see, she doesn't go to the bank. She's not like you and me in terms of going to the local bank all the time and all those other things. And it will take time for the information to filter to her. The point is, if you were too aggressive and brought it and closed that too quickly, you'd have a very onerous task, or rather you'd put a lot of pressure on the Wanjiko, the common person who is actually doing the right thing and actually has no concerns in terms of illicit flows or counterfeits and things like that. So in effect, the people who will be punished the most will not just be the crooks. The ones that are punished the most will actually be the shoshos and our people who are at a different level. So this is why we need to have it. We had this balance, and hope that it is a correct balance. And obviously there's judgment there, and our judgment was that was a balance. We could strike it there. So the second thing, as I said, in terms of lessons, was that there wasn't enough cash in ATMs, and there were long lines and things like that. So it is important for us to make sure that the currency is available in all the banks. And our intention is, in a matter of days, it should be available in every single bank outlet, i.e. every single branch in the country. That is our intention. And I think we can get to it. We can get to it. Then the other thing is the issue of having a strong AML-CFT framework. Strong AML-CFT framework. The point is that those that are involved in illicit transactions, illicitly acquired cash, should find it very difficult, i.e. impossible, to get the money in the banking system or even to bring it, to convert it. into new generation banknotes. So we need to maintain that strong framework, which was one of the things that I think we also learned from the Indian experience. We believe we have a very strong AML CFT framework. And just to be clear, I have just spoken this morning to the CEOs and operators, chief operation officers of our commercial banks, of our microfinance bank. I will talk this afternoon, maybe after this presentation, I'm not sure when, with the foreign exchange bureaus. Yes, the FX bureaus are part of this. I'll also talk to the money remittance providers, or the PSPs. That's the payment service providers as well. And we'll also, well, so that is to make sure that all that is dealt with. I'll also be communicating with our sister central banks around us and explaining to them what we are doing, and we need their cooperation. You do not want to have money going to other jurisdictions in order to return back to this jurisdiction. And it is their business to make sure that their jurisdiction is clean. So in a sense, we are offering a public service to other jurisdictions as well. And I think it's important to appreciate that. We, as a fraternity of central banks, are quite tight. So it doesn't take much to help each other. And this is something that is obviously helpful to all of us. We'll be talking further to other jurisdictions, meaning jurisdictions that actually have been through ports of various transactions from Kenya or into Kenya, so that they too raise their alertness of any flows that is destined or leaving our country. So in a sense, we need to corner those that have been involved in illicit flows and deal with it in that way. The last point I wanted to make about this is the communications. We need, in the case of India, we also learned that they could have done better on the communication. I have learned more and more how important communication is for central banking. And this is one more thing. It is extremely important. So we'll be communicating, and later today we'll be issuing a press release that will cover some elements of how the process of demonetization will take place. But I think the point here is we need to be in touch with you so that we can also communicate to the public, members of the public, quickly, and for them to feel that the process is not onerous, and at the same time it's targeted correctly, rather than sort of having a high cost to all of us, meaning it to be risk-based. Wanjiko isn't so much of a risk, but maybe other persons, of people with larger transactions are more of a risk because of the nature of their business or whatever else it is.